And yeah, just wanted to get started. First game's from Topo Player. He's playing the white side of this. And yeah, let's go through. Um, Interesting. So it looks like a Queen's Pawn game. And Topo Player ends up winning with a good tactic at the end, pinning the knight to the king. So that's, yeah, that wins material. That should be enough for white to win here. And yeah, let's go back and look at it. Hey, good morning, Aphelion. How are you? Yeah. This is interesting. This I think is called the Chigorin variation. But basically, yeah, I'm good. Good. Starting the weekend. Yeah, no, it's good. I Yeah, it's nice to finally have a weekend day. My class just ended yesterday, so I'm like happy to be free from that. But yeah, it's good. But yeah, so this is Topo Player's game. Topo Player basically sent this game over. He plays the Chigorin variation, which is two knight c3. So it went okay. I there. So one of the things that I do is I play the USCF rated tournaments on chess.com. They're pretty good. I've been doing them for probably 3 years or so. And there's 4 USCF rated tournaments a week at least on chess.com. So if you have like a USCF membership, you can like join their club on chess.com and play USCF rated games. The online rating system's a little bit weird. It's really deflated relative to the USCF rating system. But I ended up getting I think there were 5 games, and but I didn't play the first round. And then, so the 4 games I played, I went 3.5 and 3.5 and a half, 3 wins and 1 draw. But they're good tournaments, I really like the Blitz ones in particular. But it's interesting because it's sort of the same people. It's mostly the same people from week to week. The players range from like probably 1,200 to about 2,250. It's good. It's fun. So it went well. 3.5 out of 4. It's not bad. Yeah, there's another one today actually at 2 p.m. Eastern, which I'm probably gonna do. But yeah, that's one of my favorite things about chess.com is they have that USCF rated play. Yeah, no, it was good. I had some interesting games. I had one really tough game out of I think it was the Sicilian. The drawn game was actually really interesting because he got a really good attack. He basically got a really good queenside attack, but I was lucky enough to get a perpetual check at the end. Yeah, no, totally, Aphelion. Did we play in that? I don't. To be completely honest, I don't remember if we've played in that USCF tournament, but I like that one. Yeah, so here, 2 knight c3 is interesting. Huh. That's cool. Interesting. I don't remember the game. Oh, really? That's cool. No, sorry, I missed that one. I've forgotten that, Aphelion. But yeah, and I played some good games against Kiro last night actually too. He basically we played a number of blitz games while I was doing the USC. I was like between rounds in the USCF tournament, but I was still able to get a few games in against Kiro. They were good. We should probably look one of those over. If I have some open slots for tonight. If anyone wants to send over games, I have 2 open slots. But if those don't get filled, maybe I'll look at my game against Kiro, or one of the games against Kiro from last night, because they were interesting. They were basically good, very good, well played openings, and then the middle games were pretty complicated. But especially the opening theory in the games that I played against Kiri. Yeah, no, sure. I just wanted to make sure that was cool too. But yeah, some interesting games. I would mostly want to focus on the opening theory because I think there's some good stuff there. Hey, what's up, Tarash? How are you? Good morning. Yes, but so anyways, knight c3 is a little bit offbeat against d5. It's not bad necessarily, but one of the key parts of yeah, it's going. This is my first day without my last class hanging over my head. My next class started yesterday on the same day that my last class finished, but this new one's not going to have nearly as much class time, so hopefully I'll get some opportunities to move my schedule around. Um, yeah, so basically here, knight c3 is a move that develops quickly, and it comes with the downside that it blocks the c2 pawn. So with knight c3, the standard Queen's Gambit type line c4 challenges the center. Yeah, sure. Let me, you can post it here or wherever, Tarash. Definitely interested in hearing. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. But yeah, so knight c3 is pretty solid. Like knight c3, I think is pretty solid here. But it comes with a drawback that c4 can't be played. The question is how important is that in in basically the queen's pawn opening? That I'm not sure about, but it is interesting and it is a quicker development. Black can match with c5 here and sort of invert the situation. It's a little bit different because there's not that immediate queen a4 and queen takes d5 type threat that's in the standard queen's pawn game. But overall, this is pretty interesting. So I guess I would say, the main line here is c4. Knight f3 is, a similarly developing move that doesn't have some of the same downsides. Knight c3 is playable, but again, like I pretty much would steer towards the main lines here. It's the most challenging for the d5 pawn. Knight c4, and then c6, and then knight c3. And you get the same development with a more aggressive threat on the d5 square. Hey, good morning, Mantha. How are you? But yeah, so this threat on d5, it's potentially pretty. It's one of the key characteristics of the queen's pawn game. But knight c3, I don't know particularly well. I know it's a. Hey, thank you very much, Mnick, for the follow. Appreciate it. Good, cool. Sounds good. Sounds good, Agent. I hope you're in ready for some chess. Thank you for joining the stream. But yeah, so knight c3 basically has this advantage of attacking the d5 pawn early, but at the disadvantage of being unable to challenge with the c4 pawn later. Knight c3 probably pairs well with e4. Pawn takes e4, knight takes e4. Cool. Is that? Yeah, that's a good point. I get a lot of spam. Is one of the things that is true about my email. Yes. And I am reachable on that email too, but I don't know. I don't check it super well, or delete a lot of spam. Anyways, e4 I think here is yeah, no, it's years and years of spam that has not been deleted, so just ignored. I check it every day. I check it regularly, but the spam is is there. I should just keep running it up. I should see if I could get to 100,000, to be honest. I am curious about that. Not too bad. So anyways, this basically e4 threat can come next. So if white's not going to challenge with c4, then white should probably challenge with e4 instead. Options here: knight f6, bishop g5, bn d7, knight f3, g6, e3. And it's sort of transposed into a relatively normal queen's pawn game, with the one exception that the c2 pawn doesn't challenge the d5 pawn on c4. That's really the main differentiator between knight c3 and c4 here. Bishop e6 is not in the opening book. That's sort of an inefficient way to defend the e5 pawn or the d5 pawn. Like, this basically restricts the bishop's mobility. I think c6, keeping the bishop file open, is probably the best response. Knight f6 is also fine. I understand the need to want to develop pieces here, but the bishop on e6 doesn't really, the bishop on e6 doesn't really develop the bishop. I mean, it sort of sticks it on e6, and then it's sort of restricted and not particularly strong there. So yeah, knight c3, bishop e6, bishop f4, knight c6. We're in sort of our own type of unusual theory here. Sort of interested here, actually. We had an opportunity to play f5. This was a master game that was played at some point. But the bishop looks awkward on e6. I think bishop e6 is not a playable move. Yeah, no. This f5, there actually was a game that took place with knight c3, bishop f4, and d4, and d5 and bishop e6, and then it went f5. But clearly, some master was trying to do something unusual here. So I don't know. That could be a very interesting line. But anyways, knight c3. So knight c3 is a playable move, and at the end of the day, these types of things come down to theory. But objectively speaking, knight c3 is somewhere down the list in terms of playability. Like, I think really just traditional moves like knight f3, c4, e3 is number 3, but yeah, no. I mean, there's some truth to that, Tarash. It is definitely phasing. But yeah. Anyways, c4, knight f3. Those are the types of things that I would think that you should be leaning towards playing here. Unless you really know the specific theory for knight c3 well, go with the things that are well explored and objectively better. There's plenty of time to outmaneuver your opponents. It doesn't have to be by accepting an inferior opening line, if you're up to. Yeah, no, for sure. So it's up to you. c4, e6, knight f3, knight f6, and this is sort of just generally how it goes, but your choice is white. Anyways, let's play into the middle game and see sort of what's going on. Bishop to g4, bishop e2, and here, now we're in sort of an interesting situation. The bishop's hey, thank you very much thank you very much for the follow end of the circle. Interesting, cool screen name. Thank you very much for following and for joining the stream today. So knight g4, knight f3, castles queenside, knight b5, and here, basically, white has lost some material on a2, but the middle game is still complicated. It's white to move, so moves like bishop takes c7 and followed by knight e5 are interesting. But we're basically in a situation where things are going to become very tactical. There's a lot of volatility here. But I actually sort of want to look at this knight c3. So basically, in terms of improving this game, I think the main thing that I'm going to point to is just tactical study. Yeah, sure, no problem, Tarash. Thank you for very curious what your question is. You've built it up a good amount, so I'm sure it's a good question. But yeah, so bishop takes c7, bishop takes d8. A lot of trading, and white ends up winning with a cool tactic here. So definitely some good tactical study. Good job pinning the knights to the king and winning. The material there should be decisive. At the level you're at, a topo player, I would really just say spend a lot of time on chess.com Puzzle Rush, chess.com Puzzle Battle, or Chess Tempo, or CT-ART. They're all good programs and they'll all work. But tactical study, I think, is the most important thing. The kind of volatility in this game. So like basically all these bounces here. If you clear out these bounces, I think you're basically going to be in a lot better shape. Your goal here is to get to this point right here on the curve, and just keep it there for the rest of the game. You don't really want to be, bouncing down like that, and your opponent's providing you opportunities to really, get a lead and hold it here. So that's the and Puzzle Storm, I guess. I need to figure out Puzzle Storm. I'll take a look at it today. I'm curious to see how that works, but should be interesting. You know, I'm sure any tactical trainer will work. And Puzzle Storm is not one that I'm familiar with, but I'm sure that it works. So this you know, basically this opening strategy here is kind of an interesting way to play it. I think an e4 break here is probably the best idea. Black sort of needs something to challenge the center here, but yeah. Anyways, g3, and white's in pretty good shape. Yeah. Let's see. So yeah, so I guess there, white, you know, white is winning, but I would consider this knight c3 move, because it's not a normal move out of d4, d5, and if you play, you know, if you play more fundamentally, you know, well explored and fundamental openings like knight f3, there's no real lines in the queen's pawn game in which f4 gets played. So a move like knight f3 has all the developmental advantages of knight c3, but doesn't have the developmental disadvantage of sticking the c2 pawn. Here, like bishop f4, something like that, is fine. But a key characteristic of white's game in the queen's pawn game is the ability to challenge the d5 pawn, and you lose that to some extent with knight to c3. This is still an opening line. I mean, you know, basically, I can show you the theory for it. Knight f6, bishop g5, bn d7, knight f3, g6, e3. But it's basically just an unchallenging line for black. You know, without c4 there's not really that much tension in the center. There's nothing that black's really attacking. Maybe bishop e2, h4, h5 is an idea. But overall, I think you're in. You know, I think you're solid, but not, you know, not pushing black as hard as you could be here. There's more aggressive ways for white to play it, and ways that cement white's initiative a little bit better. Not saying c4 has to be played, but it's generally played in queen's pawn games. But up to you. It's very interesting. Once this game gets tactical, you know, I feel like, you know, I generally feel like tactic, you know, once the game really becomes tactical, it's like you either saw the tactic or you didn't. You know, there's less strategy and less preparation. At the end of the day, just tactics training will help you make these games a lot less volatile and push, you know, push games in your direction once you have to play chess, as the grandmasters always say. The grandmasters always say this is just a position where you need to play chess, and you want to make those situations where you're playing chess to be as good for you as possible. You want to be stronger in all of those situations where you've left theory and you're just playing tactical and positional chess against your opponent. The best way to do that is to make your tactics extremely strong. Some strategic training is also good, positional play, but tactics are the quickest way to improve in that dimension. So that's where I'm saying you should allocate time, Topo. Rook to f1 here is an awesome tactic. Put the game away for you. But there were a few other opportunities here where there were tactical improvements, and with enough study, you'll be catching on to almost every single one of them, which is awesome and a great way to play. I think there's a lot of potential in terms of improving Topo, and I think that's where your time is best spent. Just, you know, puzzle battle, puzzle rush. If you're a lead chess person, I guess puzzle storm. But you know, some type of tactical trainer. If you spend, you know, an hour a day for a month on it, I guarantee you'll improve. No question about it. Anyways, that's okay. Cool. What's your question, Tarash? I was curious about this. I'll just set up. Aphelion is the sender of the last game, or the next game. Sorry. It's been built up. I'm curious about it. And this is a Felion's game. I'll try not to get into it too much till we hear this question of suspense. But yeah, a Felion's game is out of the Grunfeld, so I think this will give a good opportunity to take a look at the Grunfeld. It's a very good opening, an opening that I play as black, good percentage of the time, and overall, it's pretty interesting. Allows for good piece play by black, and is standard high level opening that's not that's not refuted. Anyways, let's start taking a look at this game while Tarash is working on his question. I'm curious about it. This is an interesting Grunfeld. So this is the standard Grunfeld formation. It involves G6, Knight F6, and D5 played in the first moves, usually with D5 as the third move. The main line here is pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, E4, knight takes C3, pawn takes C3, bishop G7. That move order I strongly suggest learning. I basically think that this move order is something that at the very least is something you should have some type of vague recognition of. Even if the Grunfeld's not your opening, and even if you're not a D4 player, this is an opening strategy that that you probably should know. You should know how the Grunfeld goes. The main response after this is C5. Black does this to challenge the center as quickly as possible. There are lines where black plays D5 here. I guess maybe not this early, but something like rook B1 and then allows the C3 pawn to be hung. That is a line, not a preferred line for white. But black's goal is to challenge the center as strongly as possible, as quickly as possible. And pawn takes C5, bishop takes C3, and white is in pretty good and basically white or black is in pretty good shape. So C5 isn't really a pawn that can be taken too comfortably, and after this, bishop takes C3 and black is winning. So that's the mainline Grunfeld, just in case, just so people know. White does an early deviation here, pretty common one, knight F3. This comes up a lot. Here, basically, black just goes along his normal strategy, waiting for E4 potentially. So like E4, knight takes C3, pawn takes C3, C5. Here, I think that maybe knight C6 got played. I just want to go make sure we're in the right game here. But yeah, sorry, we're in that opening line. But yeah, knight F3, and then E4, and then the same concept. So if white transposes with knight F3, you do the same general concept. Let's see. Interesting, Tarash. Let's see. Yeah, there are definitely variations where white willingly gives up the rook on A1. That definitely happens. Yeah, no worries, Tarash. No, it's a good question. I guess I would say I would allocate more time to tactics, probably. I think you're an expert, right? I mean, or you're an A player to expert. I guess there you really can start allocating more time to things that aren't opening or that aren't tactics. But yeah, 1 hour of intense tactical training per day I think is good. I don't know. You feel stupid when you play chess. No, I mean, I guess I would say, you can come up with ideas. I don't know. I guess I would say if you're playing chess, you're interested in maximizing. You're interested in first having fun with it, and second, maximizing your outcome, right? So I think what you're doing in terms of studying is great, and I think that it's hard to do study like that without, improving. Um, do you feel like you're losing most of your games in terms of focus errors, or where do you think that, where do you think you're having issues in terms of improving your game? Because your training regimen sounds great to me. I mean, an hour of tactical training a day with opening study, that should work. Uh, you know, are there particular ways in which you're losing? Yeah. So, okay. So chaotic positions. I guess what I would say is, tactics. I mean, basically, the goal of tactics is so that you can pick out, you can pick out tactical opportunities that are available for you as the game is going on. It's surprising. It's unfortunate that you feel like your tactical study, you have such a good tactics rating, but you're unable to, convert that during a game. Um, Interesting. I guess I would say there. Uh, don't yeah don't I mean, first, I'm not the most familiar with the French, but I think the ability to pick out unsound lines is important. If basically your opponent plays some weird triple pawn sack, that's the point at which you need the strongest. Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, so the book that I use for that is called "The Ideas Behind the Chess Openings." It's an old classic book by Fine, and I think it was pretty strong. Fine's book was really good at Fine's book was basically really good at explaining what plans you should do and what plans you should do in sidelines. Um, uh, Interesting. And when you say puzzle rating, do you mean puzzle battle, or that's like is that's not puzzle rush or puzzle battle. That's like its own like puzzles section. I think I've used that at some point before they had puzzle rush, but gotcha. Yeah, okay. Makes sense. I don't know that one super well. Um, Interesting. Interesting question, Tarash. Uh, yeah, I mean, I think tactical study, your tactics need to be extremely strong. If your opponent plays a deviation that you're unfamiliar with, tactical study and good understanding of the position, I think, will help you, navigate that as well as possible. Uh, in a situation in which you're thrown out of the, your opening preparation, you need to have a good understanding of how to evaluate positions and how to tactically, and how to basically first seize every tactical opportunity, and then second, evaluate positions so that you can come up with the appropriate strategic plan there. Um, I don't know. I guess I would say. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, tactical study will never hurt you. So puzzle battle, puzzle rush, maybe faster puzzles as opposed to slower puzzles will help with your decisiveness and kind of you know practical play. But it sounds like what you're doing is correct. I mean, it sounds like you're really on the right track to be improving. Sorry that you're not receiving good results on that. In terms of coming up with plans, I guess I would say, ideas behind the chess openings by Fine is helpful. Then you can understand kind of what types of strategies you're supposed to play in each opening and how you could do that. Uh, Potentially, you could try to look at master games for plans, but I would go with like a mass of yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can generate it. It sounds like you're having issues in chaotic situations. You said, so the things that I would assess there are like, you need your tactics to be as good as possible so that you're not missing potential opportunities. If you're, your opponents may put you into positions where they know the theory better than you do. But good understanding of the opening fundamentals is probably the most efficient way to learn plans. Yeah, I think that might be right. Especially if you feel like you're in a rush or in a rut, Tarash. Welcome, FIFA boy. How are you? If you're in like a rut, then basically go for tactical play. Basically increase your tactical study, and I think that should at least get you a few games. Maybe I'd move towards faster games. I feel like if you play a lot of blitz games, those sort of equilibrate more quickly. If you can play a lot of blitz games, so you can get kind of more quickly to the rating that you should actually be at. Um, I think I think that's a key part of it. So yeah, I think doubling your tactics. I'm a big believer in that. I think do as many tactics as possible. You want to maximize on given positions. And then if you feel like you're having issues with plan generation, go with ideas behind the chess openings. But I'd go with those two if you're asking me what I think. But the most important thing is to make sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's no, I think that's for sure. If you do that, Tarash, and I would be shocked if you didn't improve. I think that's the way to go, Tarash. Give that a shot, and then maybe play a few more like speed chess games just to sort of get a feel for where exactly you are. Like play play maybe play 10 5-minute games today. See what your performance rating is, and then do 2 to 3 hours of tactics every day for 4 months, which is great. I can't imagine you doing that many tactics and not having a positive result. Do that many tactics per day, and then do like at the end of that a couple days where you play 10 5-minute games and see what the performance rating is. I'd be very surprised if it didn't go up. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've played through that a few times. I used to have the chess-based modules for that one, Tarash. I've probably gone through that 2 or 3 times. Those 5-3-3-4 problems by Polgar. That is yeah, that's a great book. I've probably gone through that 2 or 3 times on ChessBase. ChessBase, they just basically line up those puzzles for you, like they go from 1 to 5-3-3-4, and then they test you on it, which is great. It's a good choice. But yeah, thanks Tarash. I would wait more. If you have the time, put more time into to tactics. I don't know that method, but I think that's that's an effective way to go about it. Okay, back to Ophelion's game. This is a really interesting game. Here I think basically castles, bishop d3, c5. C5 is really interesting. White has played somewhat of an unchallenging, Grunfeld here. Basically here, I see pawn takes d5 more frequently, but knight takes d5 has been waiting, and c4 has been waiting to play take c5. So c5 is actually a really interesting idea. In terms of the most popular ideas, c6 here is transposes this into a sort of like a Slav type formation. It's a good question, Random. I like the Italian game. I think it's really simple and allows for you to basically play a game that isn't going to be too like basically there's not that many ways Italian game can go horribly wrong. You play knight f3, bishop c4, d3, knight c3, and you have a solid center, and black doesn't really have a tremendous way of attacking you. You will have attacking opportunities on the bishop or on the knight on f6 with the bishop on g5, and the game is actually very playable with relatively simple concepts. I like the Italian game. It can sometimes get very tactically complicated, but that's when you have your tactical training to fall back on. Italian game paired with really good tactical background, I think, is a really good way to do it. Basically, you will generate complicated positions, but they'll be very tactical, and you will have the pattern recognition skills required to win out of it. Open games like that are very simple, good beginner games, easy to play, and they don't lead to too many traps. I mean, as a Italian game player, what are the traps that you can run into? Like the Elephant Gambit potentially. I mean, the number is relatively low. It's just a very, very solid, comfortable opening to play as white. D4 has some unusual traps in it. Requires basically a solid understanding of positional play. Against D4, I suggest maybe the Grunfeld, but the Slav, like D4, D5, C4, C6, is a good D4, D5, C4, C6 I think is pretty solid. That plays out pretty well. Other ideas are like potentially the Dutch. But yeah, no, totally trash. My answer is going to be really frequently do more tactics. Do more tactics until you're an expert or master. Is going to be almost universally my response to most training questions. I can do what I can to also to look at the strategic concepts and the openings here. It also does depend on what type of player you are. But the combo of super strong tactical training and an open game like the Italian game works pretty well, and should be something that you can do as a 1300 rated player. But it's a really good question, Amit. That's just my opinion. I'm sure other people will have different approaches, yeah, I didn't know what that woodpecker method was, Tarash, but I like that. The main point is yeah, no, totally, Agent. Thank you very much for asking. So the main Grunfeld is this. It's D4, Knight F6, C4, G6, Knight C3, D5, Pawn takes pawn. So this game deviated. Knight F3 is a sideline. Pawn takes pawn, Knight takes pawn, E4, Knight takes C3, Pawn takes C3, Bishop G7. No. Feel free to ask questions. I'm super happy to answer any questions and can definitely give my best answer. But a lot of these things end up being matters of taste. So Bishop G7, and basically you're focused towards you're focused towards the A1 rook, and then continuing onward, Knight F3, C5 is also a key move for Black. This is how you do this. Yeah, no, the Grunfeld is pretty common. It seems to I like it as Black. This bishop can create some tactical possibilities. But yeah, no problem, Agent. I think it's an important thing that we all learn and understand what it is. Even if you're a D4 player, or even if you're an E4 player, and even if you're playing something different against D4 as Black, you should have I think understanding what it is specifically is important. Grunfeld is a good opening. I mean, it's a good way to challenge. It's a good way to open up the position a bit as Black against White's D4. D4 can lead to a lot of kind of closed positions, and if you prefer open positions, it definitely pushes the game in that direction. But here there's a sideline. There are multiple sidelines. Usually sidelines are on the third move and not the fourth move, but this is a sideline too. Black should just sort of go about his normal play. The one sideline of significance is queen to b3. It's called the Russian variation. Here it's pawn takes c4, queen takes c4, and then castles. This is called the Russian variation. It's usually knight f3 and queen b3 played in the Grunfeld. Um, uh, yeah. I think everything is good. You know, it's one of these things. I guess I'm sort of a cynic, but I guess what I feel like most coaches do is they don't tell you to do tactics as much as you should, because I think tactics are the most efficient way that someone gets to expert. I'm again very cynical about these types of things, but I feel like if a coach doesn't tell you to do tactical training, and just basically keeps giving you lessons for a longer and longer period of time, they're not really helpfully increasing your development. At the end of the day, tactics training is not something that the coaches can teach. It's something that you have to do on your own. And there's not really much reason to give someone something that you can't teach them. But I would say like you're sort of you're on your own when it comes to tactics training. But at the same time, doing that homework is the most efficient way that you can improve and move forward with your game, up until a very high level. I have a classic book here which is called Rapid Chess Improvement. Basically this book was something that I read relatively early. I read it probably when I was about 12, and it gives an excellent tactical like regimen. But I think its approach is exactly right. It says, don't worry so much at this point about positional play or openings. You can always go back and learn those later. What you really need to learn quickly is tactical training, and that's not something a coach can provide. That's something that you really have to do on yourself. My value as someone giving lessons is sort of like I can give you strategic concepts, and I can give you and I can go through openings and try to make some improvements there. But it's like the core, it's like the core of your chess strength. Your tactical strength has to be there, or the other pieces are not going to work. It's up to you. I like faster tactics trainers like Chess.com Puzzle Battle, Chess.com Puzzle Rush. Those are the ones that I use the most frequently myself, but they all work. It depends on what time control you're training for. If you're training for game in 60 or less, then I would say sure, do lots of Chess.com Rapid, Puzzle Battle, Puzzle Rush. But if you're training for like game in 3 hours or some variant of that, then doing chess.com puzzles from the beginning to the end is helpful, and just calculating all the way through. But I'm going to be a big advocate of this book, but you don't have to, the book's not that important. The main point of this book is it really focuses on how to get to expert using tactical training. And I think that's the the goal. Yeah, I think I think basically his focus is correct. He in his book he basically gets from 1200 to 2000 really quickly. There's a lot of value in that for for a recreational chess player. That's really what people want. To get to 2000. Then you have to go back and learn, some of the more theoretical things that you have skipped over in your improvement. That's where you get from 2000 to 2300. I think that's right. But I think that this way is actually a more effective way to get to 2000. I think USCF. I don't know. Some type of. I think USCF. But it's something like that. It's the perfect book to do exactly that improvement. If you don't have, and to do that improvement quickly, it's very effective. And it's basically just telling you what I'm telling you, which is just if you spend enough time on tactical study, you will catch all the opportunities in games. A lot of people are focused on theory. You can go back and learn theory later. I wouldn't say all your opening training, but I definitely think, adding as much tactical training as possible will never hurt you. Doing as many tactics as you can is never going to make your game worse. So, if you, ideally you would be a bit more balanced, but I'm definitely in favor of the strategy. Do as many tactics as you can, become very tactically strong. Because I can just tell you, knowing masters, all the masters have done it, and I think ideally people would be pretty transparent about it. Yeah, I think that will be very helpful to Rush. You've shown me enough games where you get great theoretical concepts out, and really cool openings, and you've sent a number of games where you've had very cool openings. But I think if you're able to catch up on the tactical side of things, you won't run into situations in which you're playing an opening and the situation falls apart in the middle game. I think that's way too common. Yeah, no. I really think that's where you will get the best returns. This big improvement, 1,200 to 2,000, is doable almost entirely with tactical study. And it's just something that I can't coach. I think you just have to be self-motivated and do it. But I think that if you do, you will get very good returns, reasonably quickly out of it. Yeah, no. I think. No, I think if you can get yeah, no. I think you really can get a lot further, especially if you've learned the other way around, where you're just doing theoretical concepts. I think that the tactical training has an even bigger return in that case. Okay. Anyways, this is an interesting opening. An early c5 out of the Grunfeld. Thank you very much, Sib, for the follow. I appreciate it, and thank you very much for joining the stream. Appreciate it. Yeah, no. I mean, at the end of the day, all of the study is going to be helpful. Either the pawn structures become very important, but the most immediate thing that you can fix is your tactical strength. There's no shortcuts. You just need to put in the time, but it'll really help your game when it does. Anyways, let's take a look at this. I've gotten a bit distracted from this game. This is Aphilion's game. Aphelion plays the Grunfeld with a really early c5. That's an interesting way to play it. I like the move. I'm thinking about moving to d4, d5, c4, c5 myself, but I don't know this particularly well in the Grunfeld. In the Grunfeld, I play c6, which is the main line, and do things like play my bishop to g4, play my knight to d7, and then play my queen to b6 after white plays queen to b3. That seems to work fairly well. But c5 has some interesting tactical concepts that I think it's worth looking at here. So yeah, c6. I mean, c6 is somewhat unchallenging. I completely agree. C6 goes for solid over challenging to white center. You're right about that. But on the other hand, it is solid. So if you look at this, it's probably a 90% play. But that doesn't mean that it's right, and that doesn't mean you should play something just because it's a 90% play. But c5 does challenge the center instantly. So it's fine. It's interesting. I just, to be honest, I don't know it as well. Castle's here. C takes d4. E takes d4. Knight c6. Okay, this is pretty healthy development for white. Yes. That in this case, that is that's the black Grunfeld that I know is this more kind of conservative one with c6. But here we've got h3, knight b4. Interesting. Basically, both sides have pretty good centers. White's a little bit better in the center. but black has this very strong bishop on g7 that's going to be useful in a lot of different plans. Here, this is sort of tricky. Let's see. I mean, how does black advance this situation? Knight b4, threatening to trade off white's good squared bishop for the knight on c6. Makes sense. Followed by d takes c4, bishop takes c4, and then knight d5, basically moving the b knight back to d5 to get this strong outpost for it. That makes sense. I understand this plan, and also bishop f5 could potentially become available for the light squared black bishop. Anyways, let's keep looking at this. Bishop g7, e3, castles. Bishop d3, c5. c5 is really interesting. I mean, c5 is actually much better for black's queenside knight development. That is definitely true. Basically, this queenside knight is the most important thing, or is the most important benefit, I think, of that c5 over c6 move. It's a much more natural square for the knight, especially if this center is cleared out. As opposed to d7. Interesting. I mean, c5 has its own interesting characteristics, one of them being the ability to develop the knight to c6. Castles, c takes d4, e takes d4, knight c6. And yeah, we're in that position before where black has the better bishop, but white has a slightly better center. Let's go back to the game. Here, after c5, pawn takes c5, knight c6. Good development for the knight. It makes a lot of sense. Llama, thank you very much for the follow. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining the stream. So yeah, so knight c6, d takes c4 also works. So like d takes c4, bishop takes c4, queen takes d1, king takes threatening this pawn. This pawn is difficult for white to defend. If white plays b4, then the knight can play to g4 and double threaten both this knight on c3 with, I mean, basically this knight on c3 is a huge problem. Knight on c3 and this a1 is vulnerable. Also, this f2 square is vulnerable. Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, you can usually recover the c pawn. I would not recover. Yeah, don't worry about the c5 pawn. Another thing about the c5 pawn is that yeah, no, it really is. It's a good skewer in that particular situation. So there's tactical reasons why it's important. My reasoning behind that, Aphelion, I think that's a good point. Really, don't worry about the c pawn. But the reason why I think not worrying about the c pawn is valuable is because you have the bishop controlling that long diagonal. So disrupting this structure, this e3 d4 structure here in the Grunfeld, strengthens your bishop on g7. If at any point that d4 pawn, looking at the position now, this bishop g7 is facing this pawn on d4, and that's and that's a big blockage in the strength of this bishop on g7. Instead, basically, if you place c5, you have more threats on this this d4 pawn. And if the d4 pawn decides to take the c pawn, then this bishop becomes very strong, controlling the long diagonal. So, for multiple reasons, the c pawn you don't have to worry about very much in the Grunfeld. The first thing is if the c pawn gets taken by the d4 pawn, your bishop gets this long diagonal in such a way that you're basically getting enough compensation for the missing pawn with the bishop alone. So that's a big piece of this. The next thing about c5, the next thing that's about c5 is that it's relatively easy for black to get it back, either with bnd7, in which case b4 gives that black that huge diagonal and that pin and threats on that diagonal. So bnd7 here will really effectively threaten the c pawn. So yeah, so don't worry about the c pawn. I think you're completely right about that, Aphelion. But the reason behind that is the strength. Taking the c pawn strengthens the bishop on g7, and also it's pretty hard for white to actually hold on to the c5 pawn afterwards, without doing some very unnatural moves. So c pawn gets taken. I wouldn't worry about it. Here it's a tough decision. It's post castling now. So knight c6 is good. I think that's a good development. The engine is basically pushing for xc4, in which case you're going to play queen takes d1 on the next move. That's interesting. It's certainly good if the bishop plays bishop to c4. This trades off well for black. So I guess I would say, yeah, if black plays c5, then you can take c4. Because the amount of basically it's going to be very difficult for white to hold on to it's going to be very difficult for white to hold on to these pawns. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I understand that logic too, Aphelion. The engine points at trading the queens off is better. Is objectively best for black, but here I think. I understand. I definitely understand both logic here. So keeping the queens on to attack later, that makes sense to me. You have a reason why you did it. So I think that makes complete sense as a plan. D takes c4, bishop takes c4, queen a5, and now you've equalized materially, and black is better. This opening was well played. I don't have much in the way of improvements there. The only thing was that the engine was talking about pawn takes c4, but the logic of keeping pieces on so that you don't so that you have attacking chances makes sense to me too. That if you want to play for a win that as black, that makes sense. That makes complete sense to me. Queen a5 wins back the pawn. And I think, no errors here. Black has effectively equalized. Really good opening play. Nothing to take away. I think this is very solid. Everything here made sense to me. Queen c2 is going to let that queen get chased. So bishop g4 is what the computer is proposing. Doubling these f pawns would be pretty disastrous for white. So bishop g4 makes sense. The knight's going to have to move. Like doubling f pawns here with the queen out and able to play queen h5 is really bad for white. So basically white can't let the bishop take the knight on f3 here. It's too weakening for the position. Knight b4 is fine too. Knocking the queen to b1. And I think you're almost at the point where you're going to come up with some piece threats. So bishop to g4 is responded to by knight to d4. But anything else, I think, loses the bishop, right? So knight to a4. Well, knight to a4 gets the tempo. And knight to e4. I guess defends the knight, but that's a pretty awkward move. Knight to e4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4. But the problem hasn't really been solved. Bishop takes f3. Bishop takes b4. Okay, cool. That's how white gets out of it. All right. But yeah, you're basically with knight b1, you're putting a lot of pressure on this bishop on d2. Bishop g4. Threatening to take the knight, and then leaving the bishop, unguarded on d2. White needs to come up with an efficient tactical response to this. Knight d3 is interesting. That looks like a really interesting outpost for black to have. But my eyes, I think, are drawn more towards bishop to g4, threatening to take this d2 bishop. But knight d3 is interesting. Cool. We're mostly kind of in a tactical play here. I'm thinking, there's a few different points of weakness here. First, black can try to aggressively attack on the king side here. So like knight g4, queen h5, Maybe bishop to e5 at some point. There are kingside chances. The b2 pawn here is also really pretty vulnerable. I'm thinking, in an ideal world, you could play a move like knight to e4, but playing that immediately, bishop takes knight, knight takes d2, knight takes b1. But I think you lose a piece in that, so that's not playable. So you have a few different choices. I'm just trying to think a little bit about what might be best here. I don't know. I think knight g4 probably. Knight g4 comes up with the most immediate. Basically, it does a few things. First, it allows for a threat on f2. So f2 is getting threatened by knight takes f2, rook takes f2, queen takes f2, and in the other direction, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, rook takes f2, queen takes d2. So I just want to play. I guess we can just play those through. So say like h3 here. Knight takes f2, rook takes f2, queen takes f2, clearly wins for black. Knight takes f2, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, queen takes d3, and either rook or knight both hold on to the material advantage here. Yeah, hey Houseline, how are you? How's it going? But yeah, so anyways here, I think you're in pretty good shape with black. So I would advance this knight. It has a few benefits, including a threat on f2 and strengthening the pressure on this dark square diagonal. And the knight on d3 can be effectively defended either through knight takes f2 or through probably knight takes f2 is the best way to defend that knight on d3. Yeah, so let's see. Knight g4, great. Looks good. And yeah, f5, good stuff. I mean, here I think I would probably take. I don't know. I'm sort of wondering between pawn takes. I don't know. Pawn takes e4 versus knight to e5. I guess knight to e5 is probably best. Engine's advocating knight takes e3. That's sort of a, and actually knight takes e3 is objectively the best. Pawn takes, and now basically black has won a pawn plus another pawn coming. So knight takes e3 is the best move here, but knight e5 is cool too. You're gonna win the rook pawn on c3. But yeah, black is winning pretty significantly here. Did it just yeah? Was this just a game that ran out of time, or what was the it says it ends in a draw here, but it looks like black's got a pretty big advantage. Basically black's gonna play like rook takes c3, even rook c takes c3, which is interesting. On the next move, rook takes c3 looks more natural to me, but they're both playable. And now black's got an advantage, and white has no real attacks going on. So black is ahead by a lot here. Gotcha. Yeah, no. I mean, I think probably. Yeah, no, for sure. I understand. Yeah, I understand. But black was actually way better on the board here. You're about to be up a pawn, yeah, I would just for sure. No, that makes sense. That makes sense, Aphelion. You played a good game. But that's an interesting solution. I guess I would say h6 here probably, but you're about to win material, and given that you're about to be winning, it's a tough situation. I mean, managing time pressure, and it sounds like there were some like tournament related situational things. But you can win this game. This game should be winnable under reasonably normal circumstances. This pawn's not gonna this pawn's gonna fall. You're gonna have your rooks are significantly better. Like, look how much into the position the rooks are relative to the white pawn. Yeah, no, I get. I mean, definitely makes sense. These things can definitely happen. But if you have, um, like I wouldn't want to play indefinitely with on time delay in this position. But depending on how much time you had, um, that was basically this is a game that you've won on the board. There's not really many even things to take away from it, to be honest. I mean, it was a pretty well played game. In terms of strategy here, the one thing I probably would have changed here was the threats on d2. Here, I think bishop g4 is pretty clearly like bishop g4 is a very pressuring move on the bishop on d2. The knight goes to d4, and you play like e5, but the defense on d2 is really not that good. So yeah, no, I think that's a tactical improvement here. This bishop g4 exerts a lot more pressure on black, or sorry, on white. The bishop is loose here, and also you have the fact that bishop takes f3 is definitely very good for black. So white needs to come up with complicated tactical solution after you play bishop to g4. That's sort of my one improvement for this game. I think this opening was played really well. You've equalized out of the Grunfeld as black. But the improvement that I would offer here is that move bishop to g4, threatening that bishop on d2. Anyways, we spent some time on this game. Let's get on to the next one. Sorry to get a little bit behind here, but I thought that was an interesting game, and I wanted to answer your guys' questions about training. Yeah, no, thank you very much for sending the game, Aphelion, and yeah, no, please keep sending them. They're all super interesting, and yeah, no, thanks for the game. Okay, here we have King's Indian defense against the four pawns attack. This is really interesting. This is cool. Yeah, thanks for sending it, Hyperion. Super interesting situation. This is a difficult situation for black, but with a well-timed pawn breaks here, black's gonna get some really good compensation. Yeah, no worries. No, I mean basically castles is interesting. Basically in a flank opening versus big center opening game, you're looking at a situation where white gets a spatial advantage and a center advantage, and you're trying to come up with the right situation to disrupt it. White runs the risk of becoming overextended. This sort of looks, it has some characteristics that are similar to like the Alekhines defense, or those types of hyper-modern defenses where, black is playing for a misstep by white or an overextension by white. F4, castles, e5, and basically white is putting a lot of pressure on black, but at the same time the eval is not really shifting towards white. As these pawns are advancing, they're becoming more vulnerable to attack. They're becoming very easily within range of black's pieces for attack. So white needs to be careful to make sure that he doesn't overextend. A move like, so like here, you've already got a good move. Either d takes e5 or c5. I like d takes e5 here because it fractures the pawns almost immediately. D takes e5 is not really that great, and it gives you an open file for your queen. Now you can go like knight c6, bishop to e6 maybe, because this pawn is loose on c4. Normally e6 isn't a great place to develop the bishop, but here you have some attacking chances with it. Here, white is overextending his pawn structure. You've basically gotten that break, and that's good for you. Here, black hangs a pawn, it looks like. I think d takes c5, and you win the pawn. Bishop takes e5 looks playable to me. White will probably play something along the lines of like bishop to h6, but black has won a center pawn. So, this pawn structure became almost immediately too big for white to effectively defend. Interesting problem. But yeah, this is what, this is a good situation for black out of a flank versus big center opening. White has overextended, and black is in good black is in good shape. Knight takes, rook takes. And here, basically, I don't know. It looks like it's about, the engine is saying equality. White has attacking initiative, but black has better pieces. So if black can trade off a piece here, black's going to be in way better shape. But that's easier said than done. Like, black needs a tactical maneuver to basically get pieces off the board here. H5 is not a good move, but yeah. Yeah, no, this game, unfortunately, I think you've got a good position. I'll show you. Basically here you've done a good job. You've won an exchange, and you're, and you're up material. You will need to defend against an aggressive black attack. So knight takes here. Rook takes. Interesting. G4 was better there. But okay, so this was kind of rough. I'm wondering if there's any way to steer away from this, but either way, it looks like black's king side is going to get opened here. I wonder if there is a way to sort of steer around this. Maybe. There's a tactical win here. Oh, here it is. Okay, cool. So yeah, so here white made a tactical misplay. This attack was solid. This situation was fine. White's best chances are going to be to sacrifice his rook for this knight. But at this point, the black side still holds pretty solid. Knight takes e4 is an error. There's a few different ways that that black can play this, but the way that the engine suggests is bishop takes b2. Yeah, no, totally. It's just a tactical thing. So on bishop takes b2, queen takes b2, and then this e4 knight is hanging. There were a few other ways that white could have played through that tactic, but now knight takes e4, or knight takes e4 or bishop takes e4 is objectively better. But either way, you're getting that knight on e4. So it was basically a piece-winning blunder by white. So basically, no problems. Solid defense by black up until this point. Then white hangs a piece to this tactic. Bishop takes b2, queen takes b2, and then either way take the knight, but bishop takes is somewhat better. So here, black's basically got a good edge, is a piece up, and is on the verge of winning. Here, this basically is this is somewhat unfortunate, but I think here basically the knight goes to d6, knight takes f5. I'm just thinking, because f6 does weaken, so that tactic, that was your opportunity. Everything else, it appears, leads to a bad situation for black. The best move versus second best move here is 7, and those are situations that you need to see. It's too much, it's too much to be giving away with the incorrect tactical move. So tactics as always. This game basically came down to it, like many games came down to a tactical situation. Bishop takes b2 and black is up by almost 6. Anything else and white is up by 1. There's too much being left on the table from a tactical perspective. That's why tactical study is so important. Yeah, no, I understand, Hyperion. We all miss moves like this from time to time. But with tactical study, you will miss fewer and fewer of them. It's just too much though. Like, 7 points is a decision in most, in almost every game. It's basically, if the difference between move 1 and move 2 is 7, you pretty much must see it, or you're going to have a worse outcome than you otherwise will. Nobody sees it all the time. But this is very demonstrative of the fact that the tactics, really need to be seen, and tactical study needs to be done. There was a correct move here. This is a puzzle, right? I mean, this is a puzzle on the board, and if you've done your puzzle homework, you have a much better chance of seeing it. But you could literally hand this in as a puzzle hand the situation as a puzzle into chess.com, and it would be, a worthy one for like their tactics trainer. It's just, there's a solution here. Yeah, the knight on e4. Yeah, no, but I mean, I understand for sure, Andy. But it's just, there's literally a solution to this one. It's bishop takes b2, and if you play bishop takes b2, then then you win a piece and you win. And if you don't, then white is, still aggressively attacking you. It's a win. This is a puzzle. And you want to have done as many puzzles as you possibly can, so that when this comes up in a game, you come to the correct solution. It's it's not easy. It's not easy, but the solution is simple. If you see puzzles like this, your vision for puzzles in situations like this will improve. This position could easily be in puzzle battle, and if you've done enough puzzle battle, you'll see this over the board and win the game. There's one move, and so it's it's like a test question or something. Anyways, black basically plays this, and even now, the pressure's on black. With this attack, but he sort of misplays it as well, and then the situation's close to equality. Black has better material, and if he can trade one of the pieces off, like trade rooks or trade queens, he'll be way up here. But there's initiative for white, and then this this was definitely an idea, like rook takes g3. But it's yeah, this just wasn't it didn't it just wasn't the correct tactical maneuver. But here, just from a fundamental perspective, I think it's more important to explain the fundamentals. Is just you're basically going into a situation where white's advantage, it's almost completely equal according to the eval, and white's advantage is he has more initiative. Black has material, white has initiative. So if you trade off a piece, you're in good shape. Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think that happens a lot. That's the need for tactical study. But the main idea here is get one of the pieces off the board. Is priority number one. If you can get either the queens traded or the rooks traded, your material, the attack will be over and your material advantage will win. So this sort of demonstrates the point. If you're getting attacked, trade off pieces, because that will slow or end the attack. That is definitely true in this case. If you can trade off rooks or queens here, white will no longer have enough pieces to attack you effectively with. So that's an idea. The rook takes g3 breakthrough here is definitely an idea. And h5, here I would play rook to g5 first, I think. Rook to g5, then h5, then h4. I think that's the correct execution. Yeah, I mean, but in this situation, conceptually, trading off pieces will end the attack and win for black. So yeah, this tactic unfortunately did not work out. There was actually a mate here, which is sort of impressive. Let's just play it out to the end. King e2, rook g2, king d3, and here basically, you know, black was in good shape and about to win. So yeah, tactical vision. You had a mate in 8. No, you had a mate in 8 here. Queen g1 was the maneuver. So pawn took, which was an error. Queen takes, king f1, and then you have a mate in 8 that you play queen g1, and then basically control both the first and second ranks with your queen and rook, and have a mate here. So again, a tactical puzzle, right? Like this is a mate in 6, or I mean here, pawn takes, queen takes, and this is a mate in 8 for black. With tactics training, you will see this. There's a fundamental tactical concept, I think, just queen to g1 and rook to g2, which controls the first and second ranks and just sort of displaces the king. Like even if you don't see the tactic all the way through, that general concept should demonstrate that that's the way to win. If you can get the king to the third rank, your chances of winning with that attack are very high. So that's, you know, this is just tactical vision. But basically two puzzles here. You have this position and it's mate in 8. A puzzle exists that's very similar to this, and if you've done that puzzle, your chances of seeing this in an over-the-board situation are much higher. That's just the case in this situation. So yeah, so black had a number of chances here, and with tactical study, which is something that anyone can do and anyone can improve significantly with. Black would have won this game at 2 different points. The first one being this this possibility to get to +5, +5 here. Yeah, no, for sure. No, it's, I mean, no, you played a good game. You had many opportunities. And if you do your tactics 6 months from now, you will convert on these opportunities. The first of this opportunity put you ahead by 6 points. That should be a decisive win. Bishop takes b2 is the correct move in this tactical puzzle. Puts you ahead by 6, and you'll win. The second one, you have a mate in 8 here. The eval gives mate in 8. If you can see the mate in 8, you win. 6 months from now, if you do sufficient tactical study, you could be in the exact situation in this game and win twice. I mean, it's really pretty straightforward. Like this is just another tactical. This could easily be a tactical puzzle. And if you've done the tactical puzzle that corresponds to this type of position, you will see that solution and you will win this game. It's not simple, but that is the case. And unfortunately it's not something that I can help much with. That these types of tactical studies you have to do on your own. You have to do that homework and put in the time there. But it would have won this game for you in 2 different situations, and I guarantee it's something that you can do and do correctly. Like 6 months from now, this will be if you follow a good tactical training regimen, this will be a win for you. I mean, I guess my first thing is you can see that it's the solution with queen g1 and then rook g2, and it knocks the king up to the 3rd rank, and that's probably a win. But you will be able to even calculate it into the end of the tactical solution. The mate in 8 was on the board, but it did not get converted at this time, but it will get converted by you at some point in the future. That's my take on that game. Otherwise, well played. I mean, it's a really interesting game, and just two tactical things. Yeah, no. I think you had it. I mean, it's just you haven't done the puzzle that looks like that yet. If you do the puzzle that looks like that 3 times, you'll have that position burned into your brain, and you'll get it right in both of those situations. It's it's not overnight, but you will see a puzzle that looks like that, and your brain will recognize it the next time. Okay, cool. One Diverto, his game is next, and let's take a look. Okay. One Diverto is playing this game as black, so let's take it from his perspective. Yeah, no, thanks, guys. No, thank you very much for sending the game, One Diverto. Please keep sending them. No, I really appreciate it, and thank you very much for joining the stream and for contributing to it. It's super great to have games from everybody, and yeah, no, thanks, Hyperion. Thank you all very much for being here and for sending the games, and yeah, no, it makes it so much better when you guys all send stuff and provide suggestions for material. Like, makes this run super well, and I hope it's helpful, because it's definitely fun for me, and I really like getting to kind of review these concepts and look at these games and learn. I learn a lot from this. So thanks all for participating and for contributing material for the stream. But yeah, sorry to keep you waiting, Diverto. So this is basically a Scotch game. So Scotch game is defined with d4, pawn takes d4, and white plays bishop to c4. So the line that I play against this is bishop to c5. Bishop to b4 I don't know, but bishop to c5 and knight f6 are going to be like the most popular moves here. Knight f6 is getting evaluated as best by the engine. I'm not a huge fan of this situation for black. d5 I guess is the response, and knight e4. But I felt like this situation with this pawn on e5 can feel pretty restrictive to black's development. So now that I look at it and I see the engine analysis, I recognize that bishop or knight to f6 is better than bishop to c5, but I've always played bishop to c5, so that's the line that I know. This makes me more tempted to, looking at the engine analysis here, makes me more tempted to play knight f6 here. Anyways, bishop to b4 is played, and bishop to b4 is interesting because it solidifies the win of the pawn here. But now, as a result, black will have to play accurate defense. Moves like bishop to a4 or queen to d4 can be dangerous, and the engine's giving a single line with black having the edge, bishop to a5. Here, castles, bishop to b6 probably, or d6. I guess I like d6 more. D6, queen to b3. Queen to e7, I think. And overall, I think, basically black's, under attack, but should be able to hold this together. Queen f6, I guess. Queen e7 or queen f6 are both in the opening book. But basically the point is, with bishop to b4, black is getting a material gain, but is going to be attacked. Knight g5 is interesting. I would be tempted to play knight to a6 here, or knight to h6 here. This is sort of looking a little bit like the fried liver, which is an opening that we've gone over, I think, once or twice, but here this is tricky. The opening book only has knight e5. I prefer knight h6, and the engine actually looks at knight h6. With knight h6, this f7 pawn is covered pretty well. This knight takes, bishop takes, king takes, and either queen to d5 or queen to b3, or queen to d5 or queen to f3, and black is winning by a lot. So knight to h6 develops the knight, puts it in a slightly better position, and prevents any aggressive sacrifices on f7. They wouldn't be the sacrifices on f7 wouldn't work here. Queen f6 or queen e7, I guess, are probably the best. Castles maybe. But overall, this is a bit tricky. So I'd say, yeah, I'd say castles. Maybe probably queen f6. Queen f6 seems safer than castling to me. Castling is very committal. Castling basically means that you know, you will definitely need to calculate. I mean, either way, you're going to need to accurately calculate this white kingside attack. But castling sort of restricts your pieces from being able to defend the king as effectively. If the king's in the middle, it still has escape squares. If you castle, it really doesn't have any reasonable escape squares. But those are the options. You need more defensive force on f7, either by castling with the rook or by the queen, moving the queen. Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, and it is. I think so castle and then knight, yeah, so castle, knight f3, and then you know, it's up to you sort of what you want to do to defend this h6 knight. I'd probably play queen f6 here. Queen f6, you know, basically bishop takes h6 it's definitely bad for your pawn structure. Like, there's no question about that. But in terms of surviving the attack from white, I think, you know, I think bishop takes h6, pawn takes h6 is bad if the queen is still on the board. But there's a big difference between, so say in this situation, bishop takes h6, or say like black plays like d6 or something. Bishop takes h6, pawn takes h6, and this is bad. The queen is really, you know, the queen can immediately play h6, and the black king side is completely open. That's for sure. This is, yeah, this is a problem. But on the other side, you know, if black plays, sorry, knight h6, queen h5, and then d6, and then knight f3, and then like queen e7 or queen f6. Here, if the pawns have traded off on h6, this you know, this formation, and that wasn't actually the right transposition, but this formation is a lot safer for black. So here, castles, knight f3, queen f6, bishop takes h6, queen takes h6, queen takes, pawn takes. This is still bad for black in a pawn structure perspective, but it's good for black in terms of getting rid of this, you know, getting rid of the attack. So I think bishop takes h6 is okay as long as the queen takes and not the pawn. If the queen takes and then the pawn takes, that's fine. You know, this attack for white is not going to have enough pieces to really be super dangerous. But if it's, yeah, I mean, basically the double pawns on the rook are terrible if the king is castled and then the white queen is still on the board. But if the queens are traded off, it's still not good from a structural perspective, but it's good from just a simplification perspective here. You know, now black actually, you know, remember, black is up a pawn here, uncompensated. So you know, just eliminating the attack makes that gambited pawn for white not worth it. If black can eliminate the attack, then black will just be a piece up, or sorry, a pawn up. So yeah, so knight f3 is you know, an idea, but it's sort of refuted by queen f6. I think castling is still not the correct move immediately. I think queen f6 is the correct move immediately. Castles, d6, queen f3, queen takes, knight takes, bishop g4, and here c6. This is just fine for black. You know, this game is fine for black. You know, in order to get this quick kingside attack, white sacrificed a pawn, and if the queens get traded off correctly, and the attacks basically ends, and black is fine and up material. From here, this should be a pretty, you know, I don't know if it's an easy win, but this is definitely good for black and getting closer and closer to winning. Um, Somehow this trade. Okay, so this traded into an opposite colored bishop endgame. That is not ideal. I guess I would say this. Yeah, for sure. Makes sense. Rook takes, bishop c2, f6, rook h3. Yeah, so I would definitely. I'm wondering if there's a way to do this without trading into an opposite colored bishop endgame. You're already sort of getting closer and closer to that risk as this material leaves the board, right? Bishop to b6, king f1 is correct. Trading off the knight for the bishop is a good idea. Knight c5, d5. All of this looks fine. Yeah, the engine sees knight b3 and realizes that we're going into an opposite colored bishop endgame, and it becomes much closer to equality. Black has much less, ability to maneuver out of an opposite colored bishop endgame. Here, I don't know. I guess I would just say avoid trades in general here. You're up a piece, but yeah, let's look at f6. No, I think f6 has some utility. Like f6 basically keeps white from playing f6, and that's fine. Yeah, let's figure that out. It's a good question. This position is not. I mean, this is a tough position for black, actually. I'm wondering if bishop to c3 should be played. Okay, so you're up. So first, you're up a pawn as black, so that's good. The second thing is, your h pawns are not as strong as regular pawns. Trading one of your h pawns for any other pawn on the board is a big win in that trade for you. So here, what I would do, I think, is probably, I think. Either bishop to c7. If you can even trade one of your doubled h-pawns for one of white's doubled f-pawns, that's good for you. So in terms of moving this forward, I think basically, on bishop to f6, black should be ready to play knight d7 and knight takes f6. F6 looks dangerous because it wins the h7 pawn, but it doesn't. But it isn't actually that great to trade this f5 pawn for this h7 pawn. That's actually a trade that's good for you. So, like, say here, bishop c7, f6, knight d7, bishop takes h7, knight takes f6. This is actually good for black. That h pawn, those h pawns were worth very little, and the f pawns weren't great either, but they were worth more than the h pawns. Yeah, no, that makes sense. But the thing is, it doesn't really, it's not really that valuable. The h7 pawn is not super valuable. It's basically just, not going to, it's worth trading for any other pawn, including the pawn on f5. So letting this actually happen, I don't think is bad for black at any real point. This whole trading maneuver is good for black. I think emphasis. So two things on this endgame. I think keeping it from going into an opposite colored bishop endgame, it should be a relatively high priority for black, who's winning. Might not be possible, but it's a priority. And then I would worry less about losing these rook pawns, or losing one of these rook pawns. Losing one of these rook pawns is not that bad. Trading basically either h7 or h6 for any other pawn is a win. Is a win for black. You know, if black plays bishop c7 and the rook plays h3, I guess that doesn't really even trade off pawns. It just loses the f4 pawn. But if the situation comes trading h6 for f4, that's good for black. If the situation comes to trading h7 for f5, that's also good for black. So you know, in the end of that, trading, you know, a doubled rook pawn is worth very little. So I would not be too worried about losing one of them. Losing both of them could become more complicated. Losing both of them, you know, and white basically has a passed pawn. So that's probably something that you would feel more strongly about avoiding. But in terms of worrying about f6 and then this threat on, I understand the point of, I mean, I understand the point of not wanting to lose the h7 pawn. But I think you want to, you know, not be too optimistic about the value of both of them. Doubled rook pawns are very weak, you know, in general. Like doubled rook pawns doubled rook pawns are not worth more than one pawn, you know, not worth much more than one pawn. They're probably worth 1.2 pawns or something. So losing one of them is, you know, only a 0.2 loss to you or something like that. I mean, it's not much. And it's a great trade if you can trade a pawn worth 0.2 for a pawn worth 1 or a pawn worth 0.7 or 8 or whatever. That's always going to be a good trade. So yeah, so I would worry less about this tactic, given the idea that this tactic requires f6, which makes the f pawns more vulnerable in order to attack your h7 pawn. But yeah, let's keep going. Rook e3. I mean, you know, this is getting dangerous. That a pawn is advancing quickly. Darn. Okay, cool. Yeah, I see. No, I see what happened. Interesting. So yeah, let's slow down for just a bit here. But you basically get towards equality. I would keep the knights on. First, the thing is definitely keeping the knights on is you know, good for black's winning chances. Rook h3, bishop a5. I think bishop a5 is really just kind of a blunder here. Bishop a5 turns it into an opposite colored bishop endgame. Like I would consider, you know, a rook and opposite colored bishop endgame to definitely be closer to an opposite colored bishop endgame than a rook and two minor piece endgame. Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's right, DeVerto. I think that's the idea. I think basically bishop a5 forces off a minor piece, and black wants to keep on the minor pieces here, just to avoid that opposite colored bishop endgame. So I think that was an error. Here, you know, black still probably has equal chances, but it's risky. It's dangerous, and this rook's about to take that that h6 pawn. Black's probably not better here. You know, tactical maneuvers are probably like rook e7, bishop, or rook f7 or something like that. But I don't think black is very clearly winning after it goes from two minor pieces to one, and opposite colored bishops. This endgame, you know, black puts up a fight in this endgame for sure to try to keep it, you know, to try to win it or draw it. But I think things have already moved pretty significantly against black at this point. The place to split this off, I think basically black is in good shape here with the minor pieces on the board. I'm not sure I would have even traded off these rooks. I get trading off these rooks because they do end up giving you this this open file for your rook. So that one's actually probably okay. I might not have wanted to do it, but I guess two rooks is more drawish than one rook anyways. That one's unclear to me. Maybe the rook trade is fine. I think the rook trade's probably close to fine. This tactic I think was overvalued. F6, I think basically the fundamentals on this are, you know, keep moving your minor pieces, but don't spend any time worrying about this threat. This threat trades an H pawn for an F pawn, and that's a win for you. So I would just kind of move your pieces in a natural developing way in this situation, and then potentially wait for f6 and play knight to d7 as a response. F6 with the bishop taking h7 is not something to worry about. And then I think the really kind of biggest error here was in trading off your knight to b3 here. I think that was a big mistake. A very makeable mistake, but like heading in, trading off minor pieces to get into a bishop or to get into a rook and opposite colored bishop endgame really increases the chances that you're going to draw. So I wouldn't. I think that was an error. I think avoiding that would have been a good idea. So like as opposed to threatening the c3 pawn, threaten the f4 pawn, and you're in good shape, or in much better shape. So say bishop to c7, and you're still up 1.2 on the eval, and yeah. Like we can take a look at yeah, sure. Well, we can spend a second on that. Move 18. I think this opens up. It basically unnecessarily opens up a line of attack on the white king. I think tactics along the lines of bishop to b6, king to h1, and then like knight to g3 or knight to d4 really make this king very restricted in the king side. So like g3, knight f2, king g2, and like knight to g4, I guess, something like that. E3 is a big attacking square, but basically f4 allows way stronger maneuvering of black into white's king side. That's why it's a problem. Yeah, I'll take a look. But yeah, I would say this f4 allows black in yeah, no, so king d3. Do you mean, sorry, knight d3? So f4, bishop b6, king h1, knight to d3. Looks fine to, I mean, this engine seems all right with it. I think my whole idea is that the fundamentally letting the black, knight to d3 immediately. Yeah, just because rook f3 potentially allows you to play king e1 as a response. But overall, this kingside attack gets this kingside attack gets weaker the more moves that you allow. So something like h3 or g3 here, I think are better for white. So let's see, like g3, d5. I mean, it's still good. This is still good for black. Why did the eval shift there? It's a good question. Yep. It's this line. I mean, it's this line where the king is not restricted. Having the king restricted in the corner and having the bishop attack it is the reasoning why knight d3 didn't, why it preferred bishop b6, which immediately causes king to go to h1, is better for black than a line where the king gets to escape to f1 instead. Rook f3, and say bishop to b6, and then like king h1. This leads to an even more favorable eval for black. It's the escape square king h1 versus king f1. And in fact, let's look at like knight. So knight d3, and then anything but rook f3. So say knight d2. Or actually that hangs a pawn, so that's not good. But bishop to b3. Here it's bishop to b6. And you wind up with, and king uses h1 as an escape square. You wind up with almost exactly the same eval as if you had played bishop to b6 first. It's because bishop to b6 is forcing the king to go to h1, and knight d3 allows white to have the tempo to not have to escape to that square. he can play bishop b6 and then king f1 instead. That's the logic of the engine there. Really good question though. Yeah, feel free to everybody just like keep the questions coming. Like, I'll give my best answer. But I'm pretty sure I'm right on that one. I think that's the explanation for the eval diff. Cool. Two more games. Thank you all very much for sticking by. We're going a little bit over time today. I sort of spent some time on some extra time on some things. But let's look at this. Cool. So this is a game sent by Emmett, who's playing white. And here bishop to c4. Yeah, no. Thank you very much for sending the game, One Diverto. I really hope to see you again, and thank you very much for joining the stream. It's super helpful to have all you guys send games in, and yeah, we're in the bonus. But yeah, no, it's really helpful for you guys to send games in, and I really appreciate the I appreciate you guys contributing material to the stream. It makes things much more interesting, and it really helps. So, yeah. So bishop c4, e6, d3, bishop g7, knight f3, knight e7, bishop g5. Okay. Not a good eval. Not the best eval for black here. But basically, pretty good central control for white. I'm surprised that the eval is so favorable to black here. Yeah. Were you playing? You were playing as white though, right? Yeah. This is a very passive opening for black. It will have to go with the standard. You have to go with the standard concepts of making sure that white doesn't overextend. But here, I basically think white's got a pretty solid position. Some weird stuff going on with the eval, but this feels good for white. I can't imagine that this is better for black. Big spatial advantage, good development, center control. It's the standard situation with a flank opening where yeah, no, and I think that's the right way to play. That's the right way to play it, Emmett. I think basically if you keep with this, if you keep with this general plan, and don't overextend. I would say the biggest overextension with white against flank openings is the pawns. But if you're just developing in a healthy way, this is good for white. I don't understand any eval difference from that. Like, you've got your pieces out. Black, might have some ideas with d5 potentially, but overall, I think you're in pretty good shape. Bishop b3. Yeah, sure. But white has a very natural and easy to play position here. The engine is pushing for bishop to h6 early. I really like white's position here, actually. I think you have a very good strategic setup for the attack. That's cool. That's awesome, Hyperion. I didn't even know you could do that. That's really cool. I'm gonna show that to Jen. She'll like that. That's really cool. But yeah, so here I would say h4. H4 and white is really going to start to have an aggressive attack. You haven't made the real error. You're up 1.2 pawns. You have the initiative. There's no real bad problems coming with with any. You haven't overextended. White has a very good position here. Something like bishop b3 could be played to head off d5, but I like h4. H4, h5, rook h2 maybe, rook h1, pawn takes g6. You have a very well-made kind of good strategic plan here. Very, you're going to get a very aggressive attack going and be in good shape. And then yeah, this was not the so I think there's an opportunity for improvement with this strategic idea. Basically, knight play. Here I would not worry about the center. This king side is where you should be focusing your energy. The bishop's lined up with the queen. Bishops to h6 can be played, and the pawns can start storming on the king side. That's the correct way to win this game. This looks really good for white. I would say like h4, maybe f6, bishop to f4, and h5 coming, like e5 maybe. But but here I would assemble the correct strategic plan, especially with your king castled queen side. The place to go against black in a flank opening is right for the king side. You have more pieces, and your pieces are pointing towards the king. This is over here, this is over here, this is over here, and the pawns are available and the rooks are available to line up on h1 and g1. Yeah. No. I think if you do that, Jack, I think you're really in a good place. Yeah, castle's queenside, and then h4, h5, and you're solid. You're in good shape here. F6, bishop h6. White's got a lot of chances. Yeah. I mean, just everything. I mean, this. I'm trying to think of a way that you can, or when you would know to attack the king side here. I think it's just the king is the most valuable piece on the board, so putting pressure on it in general is probably good. But I'm thinking also, in the center here, black has a lot more defensive resources. If you're kind of pushing hard along the edge, there aren't that many pieces that black can use to defend against you. Like this knight maybe, but not even, because it's got the pin on the d8 queen. F6, h6. These black's pieces are not oriented towards defending on this point of the board, and white's pieces are actually oriented towards attacking quickly on this side of the board. So since that's black's biggest vulnerability and white's biggest strength in terms of piece placement, I think that's where to go. There's only like two pieces like that black has that are facing there, and white has like at least four. So like this bishop, I'll say, is a defensive piece. This knight probably is also a defensive piece, but not a very usable one at the moment. But white has a big difference here between this rook, this knight, this queen, this bishop. They're all facing the king side, or will be used as effective attacking pieces. And because it's 4-2 there's no other place on the board where your advantage is that large. So I think that's probably why that it's time to come up with a quick attack on the king side. That's the correct strategic play. Going back to this, I think one of the things that black is hoping for in flank opening versus center opening is just moves like e5, like overextending your pawn center. So be a little bit extra wary when black plays modern or perk or king Indian defense. Be a little bit more attentive to playing moves like e5 or d5, because that's frequently the target of black's plan in those openings. Here, bishop takes g2, and white can play knight takes f7. This is a tough tactic to see. So here, king takes f7, bishop takes e6, king e8 forced. And then bishop takes e7, and then you have a discovered either check to bishop d5. So then king takes d7, and then discovered check with the bishop, or the other way. Bishop takes, queen takes, and then bishop goes like somewhere. Bishop goes to d4, d5, and you have this discovered check on the queen instead. So like queen play is like bishop e5, and then bishop takes g2. So you'll have a discovery chance with bishop takes e7. The other ways that white can do this: knight takes, king, rook, knight takes, rook takes, bishop takes e6, wins this rook, and potentially this knight on e7. But knight takes f7 is a tactical play here. Here, yeah, no. So that's that's definitely something. Yeah, it's just a tactic there. And then I think Yeah, I mean, with kind of White's attack subsided, so what happens here? Rook e4. Um, yeah, and then this loses, and then Rook h1 hangs the knight, unfortunately. Yeah, no, tactics. It's all tactics training. Until you get to 2,000, tactics training, and then you're good. But I would say Rook e4 here now, and this queen, the knight doesn't hang. Rook h1, queen f4, and this knight hangs. So that was sort of the final that was the final decisive thing. Um, but here, yeah, you're pretty much yeah. All right. So the game, the big places in this game where improvements could have made, I think. Um, uh, so attack on the so the strategic plan. So I think from here everything's good. You get a good center, good development. But here the plan, this is a conceptual thing. Like the plan is to attack the king side. You have 4 pieces facing towards the king, and black only has 2 that are effectively defending, maybe even 1.5. So that's your biggest relative vulnerability, and that's why this attack would be effective. The second thing, here, e5 is an overextension of the pawn center, one that Black's hoping for when he plays the moderner perk. Be careful playing moves like that. It sort of goes with the first idea, which is that the plan is better on the king side than the center, but definitely always be wary about playing e4, e5, d5. And then there's just this sort of tactics at the very end. But overall, an interesting game. You were off to a great start. This position is up 1.15. White has a clear initiative. Looks pretty solid for White. But the wrong. I think the correct plan was h4, h5, and that's a successful plan. In the future, I would aim towards playing a plan like that when you're seeing a flank opening. Yeah, the idea was to blunt your bishop. Just on sorry, on which move, Jack? This is I think this is better for. I mean, white is better here for by a good amount. 1.3 eval. Yeah, no, for sure. That makes sense too. But it's just it's too easily undermined. I think d6 sort of undermines this e5 pawn, and it's a difficult situation for white. Just be wary of those overextensions in the modern perk King's Indian defense openings. All right, cool. On to the last game. Sorry, we've gone a good amount over today. I'll go through this pretty quick. This is Willem's game. But yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for sending it, Jack. Really interesting. But I think choosing the kingside plan, because that's where you had the biggest advantages on the board. That would have been the play. Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I mean, because black will probably have to play c6 or knight d7. So that can be a tactical resource to make the b7 bishop weaker by blocking it, Hyperion. Yeah, no, interesting point. Yeah, no, thank you very much for sending the game, Jack, and yeah, please keep sending them. Super helpful, super interesting. Sorry we've gone so long today, and thank you very much for sticking around. And Willem as well. Thank you very much for sticking around. I'll try to. I'm really going to try to make these go to an hour and a half because I've been doing this a bit slowly. But thank you very much all for being here, and thank you all for contributing. This is Willem's game. Willem plays white. Trades off into an opposite color or a knight and pawn endgame. Interesting. And yeah, looks pretty drawish, right? I think this is a draw. Yep. Ends up being a draw. Hey, Electric Horse, welcome back. Thank you for joining the stream. No worries, Ophelia. No. I wanted to take and not all of that was on your game. I wanted to answer some questions about training strategies, and I did that while I was looking at Ophelion's game. But I do think I should speed it up because I don't want to keep people. First, among other things, I don't want to keep people waiting longer than an hour and a half to get to their games. Yeah, but now we're on the last one, so nobody's waiting. So we can give Willem's game as well the time that we can. Okay, so from here it looks about equal. Let's go to the opening. It ends up being a minor pawn endgame, or a minor piece endgame. This is Sicilian Alpin. This tends to be good for white and good if it simplifies this way. Black and white have a symmetrical, pawn structure. They both have an open C file. So the normal characteristics of like Rook C8 are not as strong there. Basically, one of the main inequalities in the Sicilian opening is running the E4 pawn against the C5 pawn, and then the rook for black gets to get posted on the C8 file and control the C file. Bishop to D2, Queen A5, Bishop takes B4, Queen D2, Queen takes, Knight E7, Bishop B5. Okay, awesome. Now we're in, basically it feels like this game is really pretty close to equality, which I guess can happen in the Sicilian Alpin, right? I mean, the center is symmetrical. White has like, a lead in the center. But overall, this, ends up being sort of drawish. Knight G6, G3, Knight G4, and really very equal game. When you have a game this equal, I sort of wonder if you're supposed to set up like a better longer term plan that has the potential to give you an edge. This just turns very drawish. I want to make sure I know exactly where it goes from being white initiative to equality. Here, knight to c3 continues white's development in a pretty healthy way. I think this was better than bishop takes b4. I think bishop takes b4 is what steers this towards a draw. Simplifying for white was not particularly good here. Here, queen d2, and then the queen trades off, and then you're basically already in a position where white has a better center. White has maybe one extra developing move, but basically the initiative that white generally has is really diminished here. I think here instead, knight to c3. I understand that you're getting attacked and that this maintains tension, but quicker development as opposed to trading down, I think increase white's winning chances here. This gets way, it gets way more drawish than I think white would prefer. So here, yeah, I mean, basically, this is a little better for white, maybe. This was an opportunity where, maybe white had some corralling the knight chances, but a game that's pretty much dominated by the opportunity to turn into a draw, and it did. I mean, it basically played off almost completely equally the entire game. There was a blunder here. It looks like a tactical error. Here, knight takes d5, e takes d5, king d5, king d4, king c6, and then king e5 would have won, actually. So white got an opportunity in the endgame here. That's an improvement. This sort of highlights the value of opposition. So with pawn takes here, white seizes the opposition with d4, and either way he's going to win this pawn. This is actually a pretty important concept. This pawn is isolated, and the black king is held by white's opposition here. The king either way, king there and then king there, and then the king can't defend. King there and then king there, and then the king can't defend. And these pawns will eventually run out of moves as well. It's a good question. Good question, Electric Horse. Uh, you know, it's true. At non-master level, drawing is a lot less common, and wins are a lot more common for black. So I don't think it's the most important thing. I think the most important thing at submaster level is tactical, better exploitation of tactical situations. That's probably the most important characteristic. This that said, being the attacker at submaster level can occasionally be very valuable. The concept of basically practical compensation is more and more of a concept. At the lower the rating, the more important practical compensation is. So initiative is important at the non-master level in the sense that it can turn into attacks. If white hasn't the initiative, if white has a 1 or 2 move tempo situation, he can turn that into an attack, and that being on the attacking side is going to be more valuable. I really love that tactics. I love that tactics emote. It's so nice of Jen to make it because it's really funny, and I like the one with sunglasses too. It's awesome. But yeah, it's a good question, Electric Horse, and I think basically using the white can use the tempo, or black can use one tempo to start an attack. And because the tactical play is a little bit more rough at class level, being the attacker offers you opportunities to win in a way that it might not if the play, if the tactical play were a bit cleaner. So that's where I think the real advantage in having the initiative is. There's always an advantage in having the initiative. At grandmaster level, somewhere above where I am for sure. Being able to push that tempo into the end game is the way that you would win. But at class level, that tempo is similarly valuable. It offers you an opportunity to become the aggressor in the game, and that has a lot of value from a practical perspective in a tournament game. Just giving your opponent the opportunity to miss like a mate in 3 or a 1 piece in 3 moves, you'll get good returns on that at class level, and that's sort of what you're playing for when you have a time advantage. So at the end of the game, at the end of the day, keeping the initiative is very important for differing reasons generally, at different or reasons of varying importance at different levels. But keeping tempo, if you can, is still very important. But tactics become a higher and higher percentage of the play. Below master level, or tactics become a much bigger differentiator in most games at class level. So anyways, it's a really good question, Electric Horse, but I would vote that time is always important, because time offers you the ability to turn into an attack. Okay. This is this is a drawish game for white. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Edit. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining the stream. But here, I mean, it's an idea. That's my take on it, Electric. I hope that's somewhat helpful. But yeah, differing reasons, but time is always important. In chess, time is the only thing, chess as in life, as, to put it in a kind of ridiculous way. The only thing you can't get back is time. Other things you can always get back, but the only constant in chess is that it's always you making one move and the other person making one move. There's no other rule in chess that holds as solidly as that one. That one is absolutely always true. Um, so time is always important, and doing things as efficiently as possible and gaining time with them is always really important in chess. Um, anyways, yeah, no, I'm joking around, and I don't think it's as I don't mean to be philosophical about it, but it's always one move for you and one move for him. So it's important that you make your moves better, and if you get an opportunity to gain some time on that one move versus one move setup, it's definitely worth doing it. Anyways, this yeah, this game played out very equally. The one improvement that I'm going to offer, just as a takeaway for this, is I think you should keep the material on the board. This is one of those cases where the situation just became overly simplified. If you develop straightforwardly here, basically you're trading off developed piece for developed piece here, and that's going to lead you towards a drawish situation. But this so this leads things in a drawish way. I would play knight c3 here, keep material on, and maintain some of the pressure. That will decrease drawing chances. There are still some opportunities for white and black here. That one I picked out in the king and pawn endgame is important. Basically, sorry, it was this opposition problem. White could do a little bit better here, offering to trade off the knights here. Knight take knight, pawn take knight, sees opposition with e4. And then black might do some stuff with his pawns or whatever, but eventually the king's gonna have to move to one direction, and you always have this h3 move to burn as well. You can play there, and then eventually the black king that's lost its opposition is gonna have to move off of the defensive that d5 pawn, and that's gonna be good for white. Is trading, instead of the knight e1 move, is trading bishop for knight okay? I just want to see on a move. Sorry, I just want to make sure I give you or I'm looking at the right move here. Electric Horse, is that on a move? Like around here somewhere, right? Like move 20 or so. It was in the later stages. Gotcha. Let's take a look. Here. Okay. Let's take a look at this position. So the knight is pinned. Okay, on c6. I would not trade the bishop for the knight here, just as a general endgame principle. I would keep things materially even. So like here, yeah. So here, like on this move, was bishop takes c6 ever a playable idea? I guess I would probably say no. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's sort of interesting. I mean, the bishop has, the bishop can't attack any of your pawns, so that actually is something that leads the knight to be relatively valuable. Yeah, no. All the pawns are on light squares, right? Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting way to play it. I mean, out of instinct, I always yeah, I probably answered that too quickly. This is actually pretty interesting. It's going to be a very complicated minor piece endgame, but uh, potentially super interesting. Yeah, no, you're completely right about that, Electric. I agree with you. Um, Interesting concept. Hmm. Yeah, that's like a really. I mean, that's a GM level question, to be honest. That's a really tough question. Uh, I think King E3, Knight D2, Knight E4, Knight D6 is a really interesting tactical play. Basically, if you're the answer is this does look fine for white. So practically here, very interesting idea, probably ultimately fine for white. The one thing about it that is important is that in this situation that's important is on bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop. You need to keep the situation closed. You know, my gut here tells me that pretty much regardless of what you do, minor piece and rook endgame with equal material, it's going to be a draw. But it's a draw. Realistically, it's a draw. Almost regardless of what you do. But this was interesting. Um, Basically the goal of white here would be to trade off and would basically win a pawn, and then trade the knight for the bishop once you are up that pawn. That's white's strategy here. Um, it's yeah, tough question. Um, uh, Things you don't want to do as white, you wouldn't want to make the position more open. Yep, knight to d6, get the knight posted on a square where it's strong for sure. Yep, makes sense. Um, I like the idea. And I guess I would just say, yeah, knight to d3, knight to c5, knight to e4, and we're black is white's getting good advantages out of that knight. But it's tricky. I don't know. Yeah, knight e8 looks pretty powerful there. It's probably a draw. But the things you don't want to do are let the king into white's territory. Like, don't let the king get past to the fourth rank, and don't open the position. This is a good one for like an engine study. An engine study would come up with some aggressive lines, but the answer is yes, it is playable there. But in terms of looking at this game, I guess I would say the biggest pieces to change were avoiding that very drawish middle game, and then there's this improvement in terms of securing the opposition. Knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, king d5, king d4, and white has the opposition and is winning. Those are the big pieces. It's an extremely good question, Electric Horse. But I think it's best suited by like engine analysis, and it's a very big question. It's a very big question, and it's probably the end result is that it's going to be a draw. Because minor piece endgames are hard. Basically, you have to really outmaneuver your opponent or get 2 pawns ahead, because at any point there you can basically trade your minor piece for a pawn, and really increase the chances that it becomes a draw, because the minor piece by itself can't mate, right? So that's so that's it. Good question though, great question. If you want to take a look at the, you can definitely set it up on your own board and run some complicated engine analysis. My guess is that it's a draw, and the answer to your question narrowly is yes. Trading that bishop for that knight in this situation where all of the pawns are on the opposite color of the bishop and the position is relatively closed probably is a it is playable for white in this particular case. trading the bishop for the knight in an endgame is usually not a good idea, but here it works and provides a complicated endgame in which white has chances but will probably be a draw. Overall, thank you very much for bearing with me as I went way over on this stream. I'm going to really try to speed things up because I feel bad making people wait for long times. But you guys are all sending such great material and such interesting things that I wanted to make sure that I gave the full time to it. This was a long one. I don't think we'll have too many sessions that are this long. But I appreciate everyone who's here till the end, and I appreciate all the help that you've provided in providing really interesting, thoughtful material to the stream. So thanks all for that, and have a very good day. The next lesson starts at 6:05 p.m. Eastern, and thank you all very much for sending material and for participating. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.